Hey, what's going on, guys? Last night, Dana White announced a massive lightweight fight for UFC 300, and that is Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan. And Dana White said in this fight announcement that this will be a #1 contender fight, and the winner of this fight will take on Islam Makhachev in the summer of 2024 when Islam returns from an injury. I believe that Dana White is blatantly lying, saying that Islam Makhachev is injured. And I have a mountain of evidence to back that up, including an interview with Ali Abdelaziz, who is Islam Makhachev's manager, and also a video of Islam Makhachev from today that essentially proves that Islam Makhachev is not injured and that Dana White is completely making this up. And I believe I know the reason why Dana White is lying about this, because a lot of people are probably hearing this and thinking, well, wait a second, why would Dana White lie about this? I believe it's a multitude of reasons, and I'm going to go through all of them in this video. But I want to start off by looking at a clip of Dana White making the fight announcement so you can get full context.
Next, for UFC 300, #1 ranked lightweight Charles Oliveira is taking on #4 ranked Arman Tsarukyan in a #1 contender fight.
So there you go. #1 contender fight. Now he kind of goes into Islam Makhachev being injured.
Oliveira was supposed to fight the champ, Islam Makhachev, but Islam is still recovering from an injury. Tsarukyan is coming off a vicious knockout of Beneil Dariush. The winner will face Islam when he returns this summer.
The winner will take on Islam when he returns this summer. Also, I didn't like the way, and this could have just been the way he spoke. He made it seem like almost like Islam pulled out of the Charles Oliveira fight. Like Oliveira was supposed to take on Islam, but Islam's recovering from an injury. I know that's not necessarily what he meant, but wait a second. Since when is Islam injured? We haven't heard of any of that. And I want to take a look at the first piece of evidence, and I could include more than just this, but this is a tweet from Islam Makhachev from December 28th, literally 10 days ago. I'll be ready to smash someone in March or see you after Ramadan. And Islam Makhachev, not just this tweet, but literally a month ago, he was talking to Russian media where he was saying, I want to be active. I want to fight at least 3 times in 2024. I'd like to fight in early 2024. Then I'd like to fight in the summer of 2024. And then I'd like to fight in, later of 2024, fall or winter of 2024. So now all of a sudden, he goes from that a couple days ago, or a week ago, basically, to now all of a sudden he's injured, which we haven't heard anybody make that claim otherwise, and they haven't come out and confirmed it since Dana White made the announcement. They haven't come out and say, yeah, I'm injured, I'm healing up from something. We haven't heard anything. And I believe this is a lie. I believe Dana is lying about this for a multitude of reasons, which we're going to get to in a second. But I want to look at the second piece of evidence that shows that Dana White is lying, and that is an interview with Ali Abdelaziz, who is Islam Makhachev's manager. Now, the context to this interview is that this interview was released after Dana White's announcement, but that doesn't necessarily mean it was recorded after Dana White's announcement. But I'm assuming that ESPN and UFC and Brett Okamoto aren't sitting on this interview for weeks at a time. I'm assuming this was recorded maximum maybe 48 hours beforehand, 24 hours, I would say. I would say this interview was most likely recorded within a few hours of Dana White's announcement, and they wanted to edit it before they uploaded it. And this was uploaded a couple hours after Dana White's announcement. One thing I want to point out, can these guys, ESPN makes millions of dollars. Can they not get Brett Okamoto a better camera? Is this 480p? Is this 480p that I'm looking at? Get this man a better camera. This is disgraceful. But let's listen to what he asked Ali Abdelaziz.
Whether it's, obviously, I think the other name would be Charles Oliveira, but if it is Gaethje, if it is Charles Oliveira, when do you think Islam would fight? I think a lot of us on the outside are they're looking at that Saudi deal that happens in March. Is that a possibility for Islam, or do you anticipate him fighting later?
No.
By the way, I wanted to point this out. Ali Abdelaziz's reaction to the potential Saudi Arabia card, he's like, no. So I'm thinking maybe that was never an option. I thought we would get Islam Makhachev versus Justin Gaethje as the main event of the Saudi Arabia Fight Night card, because Saudi Arabia is willing to shell out millions upon millions of dollars. But I know Ali Abdelaziz is not the most reliable source, but he seemed like, that was never even really an option. He started to shake his head, and then he elaborates what was the actual option for Islam Makhachev.
Listen, the deal was Islam, to fight March 9. And, of course, the UFC have a headliner already, Hafshan O'Malley. They said we can, he's the main event. And
So there he says that Islam Makhachev wanted to fight March 9th at UFC 299, but the UFC already has Sean O'Malley as the main event.
It didn't work out this way. They did, said fight in February, but it was too close to his fight.
I want you guys to remember that. Ali says they said fight in February, but that was too close to Islam's other fight. That may be an important detail that we're going to talk about a little bit later.
The one he just fought, and it is what it is. He's just gonna wait before Ramadan.
I think he meant after Ramadan. Ramadan runs from like mid-March to mid-April. Islam has been very adamant he doesn't want to do a training camp, let alone fight during Ramadan. So I think he misspoke there and meant he's going to fight after Ramadan. Because if he fought before Ramadan, the only other option than UFC 299 would be UFC Fight Night Saudi Arabia. So I think he just misspoke there.
Or maybe the UFC calls tomorrow. So O'Malley's out. We need Islam. Maybe you can fight March 9, right? Islam is always training. He's always in shape. He's a professional.
So there he says Islam would still step in and fight at UFC 299 if something happens to the main event. So if he's ready to step in and fight at UFC 299, that already blows up the whole narrative that he's injured. And if this interview, which I don't think it's weeks old and ESPN's just sitting on it, if this interview is within a couple hours, within 24 hours, you're telling me between, in that small window, I guess Islam Makhachev must have got injured is what I'm assuming. But that's not going to be possible when we look at this next clip. Another thing I want to mention, and I'll link this full interview down in the description. I believe there is a high probability, even with Dana White saying the winner of Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan gets the next title fight, I believe there's a high probability that Justin Gaethje still could be fighting for the lightweight title next. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the video as well. But anyway, Ali Abdelaziz says that Islam Makhachev could fight at UFC 299, which is March 9th. And clearly, Ali has no idea that Islam Makhachev is injured. So maybe, just maybe, since this interview was taped, in between there, maybe Islam Makhachev got injured. Well, I don't think that's the case because we have a video from today. Now, this is a video from another fighter who posted it on their Instagram story from January 8th, 2024 in the afternoon, Eastern Time, of them hanging out with Islam Makhachev. And let's take a look at this video. Because, I think this is concrete proof that Islam Makhachev is not injured. This video you can't necessarily find online. There might be someone that re-uploaded it, but I screen recorded this and then uploaded it to YouTube as a private video just so I could easily include it in this video. But let's take a look. This is Islam Makhachev on someone's Instagram story on January 8th, 2024 during the afternoon. Look, he's literally doing gymnastics. It's not like he's taking a run. It's not like he's hitting a heavy bag. He's literally on a rusty bar, basically doing gymnastics. Look at this. Look at this. So, we'll watch it one more time. Does this look like an injured Islam Makhachev deal? That makes no sense. If he's injured, I'd love to know the injury. I'd love to know the injury. And I know that's not like a crazy physical exertion, but that just, for me, that doesn't appear that Islam's injured at all. And I know that's not it's not like he's doing backflips, but that doesn't show me an injured Islam Makhachev, especially considering literally last night, Dana White is saying Islam Makhachev is injured. So that begs the question that I'm going to answer here. Why did Dana White say Islam Makhachev is injured if he's not actually injured? And I believe there is a litany of reasons that this could be. The first reason I think it could be, and some of these reasons could overlap, if you go back to that February comment from Ali Abdelaziz, there is a chance that the UFC offered Makhachev, according to Ali Abdelaziz, a February fight for UFC 298. Islam Makhachev turned it down because he wanted a little bit longer, and he said, no, I want rather fight in March. And Dana White and the UFC said, well, we already have March booked up. We already have it figured out. So when Islam said, oh, I can't be ready for February, Dana White could have stored that and said, okay, he's injured. He can't fight in February. We'll get him a fight in the summer because we already have March booked up. And obviously he's not going to fight during Ramadan or right after Ramadan for UFC 300. So that's kind of the most innocent reason. Now, the next reason that Dana White could be saying that Islam Makhachev is injured is to get Charles Oliveira and Arman Tsarukyan signed to fight each other. Both Charles Oliveira and Arman have been very adamant they want a title fight in their next fight. Charles Oliveira already had the fight at UFC 294. He pulled out a couple weeks beforehand with a cut over his eye. So both these guys have said they want a title shot. They want to fight Islam Makhachev. They've been adamant of that. They both brutalized Beneil Dariush in their last fight. And maybe just as kind of a consolation, you just kind of manipulate him a little bit. Oh, Islam's injured. He's not going to be ready to go. But listen, if you guys fight each other, we're going to give you the title shot afterwards. The winner is going to fight Islam Makhachev. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually going to get the fight, because how many times has Dana White said, oh, this is a number one contender fight, and then ultimately it doesn't come to fruition for whatever reason. So I think this could overlap with the next reason, which I believe is the true reason that Dana White made this, a number one contender fight and said that Islam Makhachev is injured. But I do believe it could have just been dangling that carrot for Oliveira and Arman. Look, Islam's injured. He's not going to be ready to go. Winner of this fight gets the next title shot 100%. You have my guarantee. And then Dana White can easily go back on that and have a million different reasons why in the future. He'll just cross that bridge when he gets to it. Essentially, that's what Dana White's thinking. But the real reason I believe that Dana White announced this as a number one contender fight is because I believe he wants to beef up UFC 300. Dana White does it all the time. I've tried to tell you guys time and time again. Dana White sells you wolf tickets. And what I mean by that is he hypes up certain fights and adds certain stipulations to fights to make them seem more important than they actually are. And UFC 300's been getting a lot of heat lately. People have been saying UFC 300's going to suck. There's no good main events. What are we going to do with UFC 300? There's a lot of people running around with their hair on fire talking about how UFC 300 isn't going to be that great. And Dana White, okay, I think that's a little bit crazy. I've defended Dana. I've defended the UFC. We don't know what the card's going to look like yet. And the fights that we have announced so far are bangers. Yuri Prochazka versus Alexander Rakic. And now you have Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan on the main card. Two straight up bangers. I know you got, Cody Bumdage versus Bo Nickel, which I don't care about. But you also have on the prelims Aljamain Sterling versus Calvin Kattar. All very, very good fights. So I think that's a little bit crazy. But Dana White has set, to defend the fans a little bit, Dana White has set unrealistic expectations. So I think Dana White is saying, look, Charles Oliveira, Arman Tsarukyan, banger lightweight fight. We're going to put a number one contender spot on the line, and it doesn't actually matter. Like I mentioned before, it doesn't matter because that doesn't necessarily mean the winner of that fight is going to get a title shot. And I actually believe that the winner of that fight will not get a title shot. I don't believe the winner of Charles Oliveira or Arman Tsarukyan at UFC 300 will get the next title shot. They may get a title shot, but it's not going to be the next title shot. And the reason I believe that is Islam Makhachev has said he wants to be active. And the UFC is notorious. When Habib was around and then Islam kind of took his spot, they want Islam Makhachev to main event the UFC pay-per-view in Abu Dhabi, which historically is in late October. So if you look at the lay of the calendar right now, April 13th will be Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan. Depending on how they come out of that fight, what's the earliest they're going to turn around? Let's say a 3-month turnaround. You're looking at July. Well, if Islam fights in July, let's say he fights early, well, it wouldn't even be early July. I mean, depending on, they said International Fight Week will be June 29th, according to Conor McGregor. He's the main event, but that's not official yet either. I made a video on that. I'll link it down in the description. But let's just say hypothetically, you're looking at June, July as kind of the earliest turnaround for Arman Oliveira winner to fight Islam Makhachev, and they may not be able to turn around that quick. That may be an outright war. So if you want to push it back and you could say, oh, Joey, well, summer is August, September as well, so they could fight in August or September. If Islam takes on Oliveira or Arman in August or September, that puts that Abu Dhabi pay-per-view in jeopardy. So I really think the UFC is going to want Islam Makhachev to fight in like late May, early June. At the latest June, they're going to want him to defend his title so that way he can fight in Abu Dhabi in October. At least hopefully fight in Abu Dhabi in October, where if he fights in July and August, there's absolutely no guarantee that he fights in Abu Dhabi in October. So I think what is going to inevitably happen is I think they promised Arman and Oliveira the next shot, but I think what's actually going to happen is in May, June, I think you're going to see Islam Makhachev versus Justin Gaethje. And if you go watch that Ali Abdelaziz interview, Ali Abdelaziz is adamant Islam Makhachev, Justin Gaethje should be next. And the reason he's so adamant about that is because Ali Abdelaziz manages both of them. So he's in a win-win situation. He's getting a cut of their purses. No matter who wins, he's still got a champion under his management. So Ali's very friendly and buddy-buddy with Dana White and Hunter Campbell and Mick Maynard in the UFC. He's going to advocate for this. Then they're going to say, oh, Oliveira and Arman don't want to make a quick turnaround. Okay, well, we'll guarantee them the next shot. We're going to make Islam Makhachev versus Justin Gaethje for May or June, maybe July, but I doubt they would make it for July. But even July, that's still a very quick turnaround for Oliveira or Arman. They may not be able to make it. We just saw this same exact scenario play out with Dricus du Plessis and Israel Adesanya last year. So I really think Dana White is saying that Islam's injured, kind of as a cop-out. Also a way to get Arman and Oliveira to sign to fight each other, guaranteeing them a title fight. And also he beefs up UFC 300 by saying, look at this amazing fight, and also look at the importance of this fight. It's a number one contender fight. Really, in his mind, he's thinking, well, May, June, we're going to book Islam Makhachev versus Justin Gaethje. That's what we're booking. Headliner of a pay-per-view. That way we can turn around Islam and have him still fight on that Abu Dhabi pay-per-view. So I think that is the reason why Islam Makhachev has been lied about, and Dana White says, oh, he's injured, even though he's not actually injured. But maybe also Dana could just be thinking, oh, well, he couldn't fight in February, so he's injured. There is that reasoning. But I've already seen people, the Dagestani haters, saying, oh, well, he could have failed a drug test, and maybe, oh, he's just inactive, and he doesn't want to fight, and he's only fighting featherweights. That's all horseshit. That's not true. That's not happening. The reason is Dana White is just kind of playing the game. Dana White is notorious for lying about number one contender spots. He just lied about Kamaru Usman, Khamzat Chimaev, saying, oh, they're next in line. And then he booked Sean Strickland versus Dricus du Plessis right after that fight. He said that was number one contender. He said Bilal versus Gilbert Burns was number one contender. Now, that may inevitably happen, but he was non-committal after UFC 296, where Leon Edwards beat the brakes off of Colby Covington at that post-fight presser. He was non-committal. And there's been historically times where Dana White says, this is a number one contender fight, this is a number one contender fight, and it ends up not being a number one contender fight. But to sum it all up, I really think it is made a number one contender fight to make UFC 300 bigger, because Dana White has set these unrealistic expectations for UFC 300, so he has to add that extra layer of importance to this fight. And ultimately, the winner of that fight can still fight potentially Islam Makhachev in the end of October. So it could all work out if everything goes to plan, but that's not necessarily how everything usually works out. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and thank you so much for watching.